Hi there, welcome back to 5G Guys. This is Dan McVaugh, as always. Going solo today without Wayne. Wayne and I had some scheduled conflicts, so had a great guest today, and we didn't want to miss the opportunity to have him on. We have Steve Orrin. He is the Chief Technology Officer and Senior Professional Engineer for Intel Federal. I think we've all heard about Intel before, and so we were excited to have Steve on the show. So, Steve, welcome.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me today.
You bet. So start us off. Help us introduce the audience to yourself, your background, how you got where you're at today.
Sure. So I've been the federal CTO for Intel going on almost 10 years now, basically helping the government adopt technologies and take advantage of the advanced capabilities that Intel brings to bear, helping to apply those technologies and our roadmaps to their enterprise and mission needs. My background is in cybersecurity, having run both cybersecurity programs and product development at Intel, as well as multiple security startups back in the 90s and early 2000s in a variety of areas from desktop security to enterprise and mainframe systems to helping to start the web security market. So really got my feet wet in the industry, helping to solve some of those big, hairy problems around cybersecurity, threat reduction, detection, mitigation, and implementation of controls against regulations. Got acquired by Intel back in 2005 and have really had a fun time of sort of helping Intel advance and drive next generation security capabilities into our products and into the market and to help large enterprises, home users, everyone in between get better security. And along the way, because the federal government is a large consumer of technology as well as has really high security needs, I've been spending a lot of time throughout my career helping the federal government solve some of those big security challenges. And so when the opportunity arose at Intel, where they were building out a federal capability for the first time many years ago, they looked to me to help start the technology practice under that federal capability. And so I came over and moved back east. So I grew up in the New Jersey area, moved to California to be part of Intel, and came back east to really help shape and guide the strategy, the technology evolution, and the engagement with the federal customer across all of our technology, not just security, but AI, high performance computing, IoT, connectivity. And one of the things I love about working with the federal government is you literally have every possible use case somewhere in the federal government. One great example is you talk about health and insurance, and you think about, hospitals and insurance providers. Well, the VA is one of the largest health providers in the world and insurers of people. And so you have a lot of the same applications, a lot of the same challenges of providing medical needs to the veterans in a distributed environment with hospitals globally and being able to service the veterans wherever they are. So they have a lot of the same challenges that a local hospital system would have, just at an enormous scale. Similarly, you look at manufacturing, you look at edge sensing, you look at connectivity, they really do have just about every use case. So I find it fascinating that I could be talking IoT one day, large scale AI the next, talking national security, sensitive information, security protections the other. So it's a constant, that diversity of use case and diversity of mission keeps it exciting and really fun.
Hmm. That's awesome. And I think for me, it was when you and I first met, what was really interesting to dive into was the focus that you have in the federal division, but yet how there's those commonalities that you talked about across of all society because of that representation. Maybe to start things off, let's talk a little bit about maybe what you've seen over the last, your career and more recently over the last 2, 3, 4 years in terms of what's really driving technology right now as it relates to this adoption that you're helping advise your federal clients on.
So I think we're seeing a lot of different sort of trends, or in some cases, evolutions or revolutions in technology that are actually coming together. Computing power continues to increase while it miniaturizes, so that's Moore's law in action. So we get more and more compute for the in less space with less power over time. And what that means is it's not just about having these hyperscaler clouds, but it's also being pushing more computing to the edge, to where the data is generated, the data is collected, or where the information is needed to make decisions. And so we're seeing it drive computing capability and power to both sides of the equation. At the same time, we're seeing that compute enable capabilities, AI being the topic du jour for everybody, But really, AI at the heart is we have the computing power to process the complex math in a timely fashion, and then driving that AI revolution we're all living through right now is the access to and the amount of data. And data is that people say data is the new oil. It absolutely is the gas fueling the engine of AI, because you only get these large language models with that first letter, large, immensely large. And so in order to
Right.
have the benefits that we're seeing, there had to be all this data that's being collected and being produced across both the edge, the cloud, and everywhere in between. And so the data is driving these new applications in AI. And then you fit in the last piece of the puzzle, which is pervasive connectivity. And so, connectivity has revolutionized time and again throughout the last 20, 30 years. We're seeing, whether it be the adoption of Wi-Fi and then the internet explosion and then mobile devices and then connectivity to those mobile beyond just phones to data, and now with 4G, LTE, and 5G. And then we start flipping that to the edge computing, the IoT. It's not just a smart sensor in your house that's doing your thermostat. It's everything is connected. And so when you have everything connected and everything driving applications, driving data, and driving that computing at the edge, you are enabling a whole new way of thinking about how we enable different workloads, how we enable the user, and the kind of applications we can deliver in near world real time, and that connectivity between systems as they start to collaborate. A lot of people talk about collaboration of individuals and meetings and things like that, but the systems of systems are collaborating on data sharing and information gathering, as well as on action, command and control, actuation, and so forth. So we're seeing a much more complex convergence of these different technologies that's driving the revolution. So you don't get a smart car without the data, the AI, the
Right.
connectivity, and the edge processing. So that is sort of one of the culminations of all of these different technology evolutions and revolutions driving to those use cases. And when we look at, well, how does that affect our everyday lives? Well, we're already seeing it in our everyday lives. Many of the applications we use on our phone, many of the things we use in the cloud are enabled by that data, that AI, that connectivity. And when we look at the federal market and look at public sector and the kind of use cases they have, you're seeing that same kind of revolution of the application of the mission across the board. There's some really great examples of where having the ability to deploy, semi-autonomous agents with AI embedded to be able to go prosecute the mission has been able to be game changer for all parts of the federal government. I like there's a great example from a number of years ago I like to highlight as the really a pinnacle of what is the art of the possible. And it was a proof of concept that forestry demonstrated. So the Department of Forestry manages the national forests, and one of the challenges they have is they have, one or two rangers for a national forest to keep track of hikers and also check on the health of the forest. And so you can send somebody out to go walk the trails and sort of see, yeah, things look okay, but you're not really getting a comprehensive view of the health of a forest when things like forest fires or blight and other diseases. And so the forestry division piloted a program where they took drones with AI embedded on them that were deployed out into regions doing semi-autonomous. So they were given an area of focus, but then they autonomously flew through that environment based on whatever obstacles and the environment they were finding to detect blight within the national forests. And some of the immediate benefits they saw was, number one, they got much better coverage because they could send these drones all over the forest instead of just on the beaten trails. And two, they were able to get much quicker time to data of knowing when a section of the forest was had been exposed to blight, and could then remediate before it became catastrophic or before it became a real issue, because they were able to do early detection by having a wider coverage and instant recognition. So the systems on these little drones were able to, video take pictures of the environment, look at the trees, and recognize blight for those particular species, and immediately report back the actual geolocation and the tree that was infected with video evidence, so that then management could make decisions about the control mechanisms they were going to do, whether it be a cutting or a controlled burn or whatever the right mitigation was, and be able to do it quickly with much less resources in a more timely fashion. And so that was just one great example of taking a technology that we all, everyone knows about drones and how they can navigate through spaces and fun races, but using that technology to actually, save the forest and be able to do the mission at a much bigger scale than their current budget would allow for as far as number of rangers. We've seen that kind of implementation of technology that we take for granted a lot of times in the private sector, applying game-changing capabilities in the public sector.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I've experienced in my career is that as being on the inside of developing and deploying technology, we sometimes not it's going to be a pun here, but we miss the forest for the trees, right? We get caught up in the technical capabilities, and we miss these use cases that others that are not inside of the technology can help find. And so often some of the game changing use cases are not anything we dreamed up as technologists. It's the users that really drove that adoption of that use case. And when I'm listening you talk about this one, tell me about you talked about pervasive connectivity. And we all think about connectivity as a cell tower to our cell phone or a wireless access point and Wi-Fi to our computer. But pervasive connectivity goes beyond the network to the end user. I mean, I could imagine in this case peer-to-peer connectivity, a drone directly to a drone without the aid of a network could potentially be a game changer. Are you seeing those types of peer-to-peer connectivity use cases as well? And was that the case in this example?
So it's a really good question, and let's look at it from a couple of perspectives. The peer-to-peer communication can be used for a lot of things. Some of it is just information sharing, as far as being able to navigate through an environment. So we've seen search and rescue missions where having drones communicate with each other to map an environment, identify individuals, and be able to relay that information back to whether it be a first responder, or in the case of some examples where you have different kinds of drones. You have heat sensing drones, you have video mapping drones that are out doing it, and you get a heat signature here. There could be a direct communication to a different drone with a different capability. Say, hey, I've identified a target, come over here and give me a video representation so that the rescuer can see the actual environment, to understand the logistics of how to rescue that individual, as an example. We've seen it, so in those kind of mapping and surveillance use cases, whether it be for rescue or force protection for physical environments across multi-domain, and that's where one area. The other is in redundancy and failover. So where you're deploying a variety of sensors out there, and you want to be able to prosecute the mission or be able to perform your overall function in an environment where you could have limited comms. You could have things in the environment that could be roadblocks or hindrances. Something gets trapped, something gets destroyed, something runs into a tree, or something along those lines, and being able to pass off your mission so that you get resiliency in the environment. The only way you get to that semi-autonomous or even fully autonomous resiliency is if the drones or the sensors themselves are communicating amongst themselves and being able to say, this is the data I have, what do I need? Or, we've lost connectivity with drone 7, so drone 8, you're now the leader, take over, and do that automatically based on policy and orchestration. We're also seeing examples where the machine-to-machine communication helps to get better fidelity around the information you're seeing. You can't have your most exquisite sensor placed at the absolute right place. You have a limited number of those. So you deploy sort of your average sensors, if you will, over a large swath, and let them be your early warning system to say, hey, I've detected something here. Bring online the more powerful sensor. Bring that drone, bring that satellite, whatever the use case may be, into focus on this area. Now that I've identified something that's of interest, I don't know what it is, but I'm getting a signal here that needs to be identified. And so that real-time command and control. The other is, again, augmenting the human. And this is where a lot of the cases, people think, oh, the machines are going to do everything for me. No. A lot of the use cases around this pervasive connectivity, AI, and edge computing is really about giving, whether it be the warfighter, a doctor, or a forest ranger, the right information at the right time, and being able to help augment their decision making. And so a lot of it is being able to communicate back to the user, or to have the different systems collaborating with each other in order to enable the user to make a better decision, giving you better real-time intelligence, being able to perform functions on behalf of the user to speed their mission or their objectives. All of this collaboration, it's not just machine to machine, it's machine to human, machine to machine, and it's leveraging that whole holistic system of systems at the end of the day, is how do we get the job done cheaper, faster, quicker, and with better
Yeah.
fidelity, better accuracy.
Yeah, yeah. I remember touring NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, in Boulder, their labs, and they were having design competitions awarding research for technologists that were coming up with advancements that could be applied to FirstNet, which
Mm.
you're familiar with. FirstNet is the 5G network for first responders that is dedicated to their use. And one of the really cool technologies was they were using lidar systems to create digital twin maps of floor plans, combining that with an AR heads-up display for firefighters, so that when they were out on a call, that someday they would be able to utilize the 5G network, the FirstNet network, to push that digital twin floor plan to their heads-up display. So while they're in a burning building, they can literally see the floor plan through the smoke to try to navigate, for example. So really, I think that's another great, your point about that AR, I think, is a great point. Having come from a cybersecurity background, let's talk a little bit about this pervasive connectivity and this convergence of technologies. And does it keep you up at night from a security standpoint, from a cybersecurity standpoint? Tell us more about that aspect of it.
So yeah, it's an interesting way of looking at the world. When I look at it from the cybersecurity angle, is every evolution, every new technology innovation is its own security challenge. It opens the door to larger surface area. For anyone who's listening who wants to get into cybersecurity, I can tell you it's one of the few fields that is recession-proof, depression-proof. There's always a need for security. And just when you think you've solved the one problem, 5G comes along or edge computing or a new AI model, it's constantly changing. So it is absolutely a constant battle, both to protect the assets we have as well as try to be able to keep ahead for the new things that are coming to us. And so when you talk about pervasive connectivity, what we're talking about is having more things talking. So that's more network connections that need to be secured. We have more things on the other end of that network that need to be secured, and we have more data flowing through those systems that need to be secured. So from a fundamental perspective, we keep increasing the surface area of attack almost exponentially every time we add these kind of pervasive technologies to the mix. One of the key areas that's really the most challenging is how these things come together. So when you think about, well, I can secure point to point using a network encryptor for my edge to cloud or for my drone to backend system. I can secure my peer-to-peer with a communication. I can put controls on the device that secure the data while it's stored there. I can do all these sort of individual controls for the individual problems. The biggest challenges is as you connect these systems together, as you compose these systems and create these system of systems, much of the security vulnerability comes in the seams. It's, when the data leaves the hard drive and is about to go into the network, it's exposed. When it's being collected and aggregated on the back end, and now you've got sensitive and unsensitive data being collected, you have sensors that you trust, and maybe some sensors you don't trust as much. And how do you validate and trust the data flows? And what poisoning could happen from one to the next? It's the seams between the integration points are often the hardest challenges and also often where the bad guys get in. And it's a lot of times when you think about the complex supply chain of these systems, connecting them all together. How do I protect this integration of multiple technologies, multiple technology vendors? How do I verify the vendors and what standards do they use? I think one of the interesting challenges about pervasive connectivity with the pervasive computing and IoT is in the laptop or the server world. Even though there are lots of vendors, it's a small number relatively speaking. Maybe there are 8 top OEMs for laptops and maybe another 8 or 10 on servers, and there may be 4 or 5 or 6 cloud providers. So it's a knowable, tractable number. On the IoT space, even in the drone category, there are hundreds of developers. Sensor category, there are thousands. And we start getting into smart sensors and smart actuators. There are thousands upon thousands of vendors building their little widget and having to try to figure out, well, is that widget secure? What did they do to incorporate? So you think about a drone, it's a device, but it's got a camera, it's got a motor, it's got a hard drive, it's got a little mini compute. So there may be 5 or 6 vendors components inside that drone, all of which have to be secure and securely work together. So the cybersecurity challenge is a really interesting problem. And I think a lot of what the industry and the government is definitely pushing this way with their executive orders and the memorandum is we have to think differently about how do we secure these systems going forward. We can't use the whack-a-mole. Well, I got a drone, I got to go secure that little thing. Or I've got this application, I'm going to try to secure that. We have to think differently. And that's where zero trust and zero trust architecture is coming to the fore of a way of looking at how do I secure these systems of systems, these complex interactions at a more holistic level where I can apply some key tenets, some key policies. And the first one out of the gate is default deny, which basically says don't trust anything. Don't implicitly trust anything. Have everything be able to prove that they're trustworthy before you accept them in, before you give them access, before you give them data, before you trust their data. And that shift in policy from trust nothing, verify everything, which is really what at the heart of what default deny is, and everything that flows from that, continuous monitoring, continuous authentication, is really about that change in mindset of not trusting. So if you think about the old model is once you authenticate, you're good, you're in. I know you. You must be allowed. Okay, I'll do a little bit of authorization check for this transaction, but I've authorized you so you can go get that stuff too. That model just doesn't work in these complex next generation environments, especially as we start thinking about things like AI and deploying that in at the edge. How do you trust all of those systems coming together to affect your mission? How do you trust it? And then how does the system trust you? And that's where zero trust is really trying to solve, or at least help organizations get a better handle on the risk. And that's the other thing. It isn't about solving the problem. You're not going to solve all. There's no such thing as 100% security. It really is about how do I manage my risk to a level where I'm comfortable from a risk management, risk posture perspective to accept this is secure enough based on the
Yep.
value or the policy that's implemented. And what that does, it helps you not spend all of your budget on something that actually isn't the risk that your organization cares about. So it allows you to apply the right risk calculus to the right transactions at the right time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And on the commercial side, the public side, to your point with IoT, so many of these devices are so simple and low cost in order for them to work as a business case. That in and of itself is sort of a problem for them having the right level of technology to secure them. I can imagine, you know, yeah, when you've got a laptop, hundreds to thousands of dollars a unit, a lot easier to put technology for securing it into that versus a device that might be pennies or dollars per device, right?
Exactly. And then whether it be
Yeah.
an end consumer or a business, when they're applying, well, how am I going to secure this $2 device, which I know they didn't have any budget to secure that device. There's two considerations come into place. Number one is you shouldn't be using a $2 device for national secrets or monitoring your
Right.
health. At the same time, there are controls you can put in place to isolate it, to segment it, to protect your more valuable assets from these devices that may not have that security. And that's where it's network segmentation, in the case of 5G, network slicing, be able to say, okay, this is the high
Mm-hmm.
security stuff. This is the less secure. I'm not saying everything is automatically malware, but being able to segment your network, segment your device
Mm-hmm.
architectures so that you can manage the risk for the more riskier things to keep them away from having an adverse effect on the things you actually really do care about. And so that's one approach that a lot of people have taken is that segmentation and strong policy controls and what that thing can do. Ultimately, also, when you're looking at building your system of IoT, if you're a manufacturing floor and you think about what are the most important parts of the puzzle, one of the big terms that's being used a lot of times is supply chain risk management. And that means knowing your vendors. And if you're looking at a variety of vendors that are providing the widgets that's going to give you the quality controls, and your business is producing widgets and you need them to have high quality in order for you to make money, you're going to invest some time and energy to validate those devices are good quality, they're secure. And if they need to be connected, is understand, well, why do they need to be connected?
Mm-hmm.
Do they connect to the
Mm-hmm.
internet, or can I keep them locally connected to just to the management console and isolate that whole network? And so it's about limiting the access, even for some things that you can't necessarily assume have the most advanced security protections built in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you working again on the federal side, you get that sort of that first touch to things like regulatory policy that help control and protect on a lot of these things. For example, me being a radio frequency engineer, I know that a radio frequency device that's transmitting radio frequency is required to be type accepted and approved by the FCC for doing that. That doesn't mean there aren't rogue devices out there, but if it's something you're buying off the shelf, you can be ensured that it has gone through that process of being deemed, safe within the standards the FCC has set for, radio frequency exposure and things like that. Are you seeing those same sort of regulatory policies and oversight come into other aspects of technology, like federated identity and cybersecurity and other aspects of devices?
So it's a really good question, and I think there's a couple ways to come at it. For the federal government, there are existing security controls for any application or device that's going on, whether it be civilian or military. There's the Federal Information Security Management Act, or FISMA, from a number of years ago that dictated the NIST 800-53 controls. And it's a control regime for the minimum level of security controls necessary for anything that's going to go run on a government network. And so that became the baseline for everybody. Think about the cloud architectures, the FedRAMP regulations and compliance controls are built off of 853. So it really became the foundation for a lot of the others. What we're seeing around devices in particular, and I'll start with sort of the broad government, civilian, critical infrastructure, and keep DoD off to the side for a moment, is that they're looking to NIST and other environments to help provide those guidance requirements. NIST has security profiles for medical devices, for critical infrastructure, IoT devices, for healthcare, for a variety of different vertical use cases. They've created guidance for the security of those devices and have published them, and that's available. You find within certain domains, in the energy community, there are regulations and requirements for the security of power generation and power substations, for water treatment, that come from those organizations. Most of them government, some of them are industry driven with government oversight, so like FERC and NERC and things like that, which are providing those overarching guidance about firewalling, authentication controls, and the like. So we do have that for various different industries around critical infrastructure and civilian networks. On the DoD side, they have all of that plus. So they have MilSpec and FIPS and others, and those are really around the ruggedization of the devices. So something that's going to go into a Jeep that could be deployed to the desert needs a little bit more protected than something that's sitting in an office. And so the ruggedization and the shock and the temperature and the ability to keep sand out and things like that, as well as the security of that. So there's the Federal Information Protection Standards, or FIPS, which were created many, many years ago and continue in the new version. The FIPS 140-3 was recently published, of how do you secure the keys and the encryption and the cryptographic features of a platform when going into a DoD or national security system as a requirement. So it raises the bar of how I protect the most important things, which is the keys to the kingdom, the encryption keys, the authentication keys, and the cryptography itself in these DoD and national security systems as an elevated bar. And what we've seen, what's really powerful about the government doing this for their stuff, is you see other industries adopting those standards. Financial services have oftentimes, you look at a lot of the regulations for financial services, you look at the control language, and they literally cut and paste from 853. They actually, in their vendor procurements, will say it must be FIPS certified, because these products actually provide the equaling level of security. And if there's already standard, why reinvent another? Plus, if a vendor like a Microsoft or a Dell is already building a FIPS product, that means it's already been done. I can go buy it for my bank. And so we're seeing that market driver across regulated industries leverage a lot of what the government vanguarded. We see the same thing in the EU with their EU security guidelines, the ENISA. There's a lot of commonality, and there's not by accident. NIST and ENISA collaborate to make sure that we're not building, regulation regimes that are completely divergent from each other. So there's a lot of commonality, because ultimately the large and small vendors have to be able to service both worlds. And you don't want a small vendor having to create a whole new product just for the EU that they can't sell in America, and vice versa. So there's a lot of commonality in those security requirements and regulation requirements across multiple industries in public and private sector. And there's collaboration. One of the nice things about NIST, and they stood up a lab called the NCCUE, or National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, with its actual mission is collaboration with industry. So it's the government and industry, with both industry and government use cases driving the guidance documents. So how do you stand up a secure container environment? It's not a secure container environment for federal. It's how do you set up a secure container environment with the right controls and the right things for, the variety of open source and commercial products. And so they publish that guidance to help everybody, from public sector organizations like the state police to the DoD, down to the banks and the manufacturing plants. Everyone can take advantage of the work that's being done there. And NIST right
Yeah.
now is putting out a 5G security recommendation. And so the 5G security, it's currently in draft. And there's a lab that they've built at the NCSU where they demonstrate all the security technologies applied to a 5G environment with commercial products. So you've got all the commercial vendors, and both from the back-end infrastructure all the way out to the RAN and the UE, and show how do you deploy a secure 5G standalone network
Right.
and publish, here's how you do it. So it's not like some secret.
Right.
It's everyone should do this.
Yeah, and when I go back earlier in my career when we had the quote unquote 1G 2G period, there the technology standards that drove those technologies didn't have anything at all hardly written into them around security. Today, the 5G standards have security directly written into the standard. So if you're developing a 5G technology to be standard compliant, you have to comply with those requirements as well as all the other technical requirements. And I think what I love about your role is, I mean, going back to the early 1900s, so much of the technology we as consumers benefit from today started at the federal level. It started out of a need for defense, homeland security, whatever the case might be. World War II, huge technology advancements came out of what we had to develop technology wise for that effort. And then over time, those technologies then start filtering down into consumer products. I can remember in the early 2000s working with a company that had done really advanced radio frequency technology for satellite systems for the government for surveillance. And that technology now 30, 40 years later is the core of the radio interface for 4G and 5G. It just had to be dumbed down because it was too advanced. It didn't need to be as advanced for us, our use as consumers. So I think that's what I love about your role. As we kind of wrap up, I'd love to hear your take, to the extent you want to and can, on what do you think the next 3 to 5 years is going to look like? What are you seeing happening that we could look forward to as consumers as those advancements at your level, at the federal level, start becoming pervasive in the consumer space?
So Dan, that's a fascinating question to sort of think at, project out. Let's look at the future. And it's hard because every 3 weeks there's another revolution that we're dealing with. AI is just changing so fast. I think, if I were to pick on three things that I think are going to be game changers over the next 3 years, one is, and it's in the AI space, and it's really a lot of work and a lot of focus is on what I call the sexy, really shiny object part of AI. AI is going to do all these really cool things, and that's great. Let them go advance that. Where I think it's going to affect a lot of our day-to-day lives, especially on the business side, is where we take AI and we apply it to the more bureaucratic, manual, paper-based processes inside every organization. And whether that be a large or medium or small business, or even individuals that are interacting with them, when AI can come in and automate a lot of the routine, mundane, repetitive, and often manual or human in the loop kind of processes, what we're going to see is a much quicker time to response. We're going to see a significant reduction in cost, and we're going to see a much better time to market and honestly better quality out of those systems. And so whether that's be ERP and logistics management, whether it be healthcare record policy on the back end. So think about it. You get your healthcare, you then submit in the claim, or the doctor submits a claim, then someone's got to review it, and then it's got to go through 14 steps before somebody gets paid. If I could reduce that from 6 months to 3 weeks to 3 days to 3 minutes, you as the consumer get your money faster, or you're getting the benefit of having your bills paid faster. The health provider gets their money better. The insurance provider is being able to reconcile that much. Everyone wins in that pipeline of that value chain, and it's really about taking AI and applying to the non-sexy part of business. And I think we're starting to see the beginnings of that with innovations like RAG and others applying AI to those more paper-based business processes is going to be game changer, because once we can do that, we do two things. And one, we free up resources to go do some of the more interesting stuff, but we also speed up the time and we give better quality of service, better customer service to the individual. I think we'll all start to see the benefits, even if we don't know that the large banks or the manufacturers or the retailers are doing this on the back end.
Right.
We'll see the benefit because we'll get faster time to response. We'll get new products more quickly. We'll just get our bills paid faster. So a lot of that's going to be where I think AI will really provide the biggest value to a lot of organizations, and we will all benefit from that. I think once we get past the hump on the 5G deployments, and that I'm going to say 3 years, it could be longer. Depends on who you ask. Which pundit is pontificating on how fast the U.S. will upgrade its infrastructure to true 5G, and when we start seeing not just our phones but our devices being able to tap into that power, I think a lot of the vision around the applications that can be deployed will be deployed. And so we'll start to see, the promise of augmented reality, the promise of real-time decision making, more smart things that are actually doing something more useful. I mean, do you need a smart refrigerator today? Maybe, maybe not. But if you start to have all of your devices connected with those speeds and with the applications being deployed, what could they enable for the end consumer? What things could you benefit? And that's where we start to see that shift to the applications that we have on our phone being bigger than our phone. It's connected to our car, connected to a lot of our devices. And I think that's where, one really cool use case I saw in a demo was, imagine your phone and your car and your corporate account are all linked together. And so when you walk into your car, it knows you need to be a meeting in DC, and you get there and it's already downloaded the document that you need to present. All of that interconnected collaboration happens with that pervasive connectivity, that the sensors in the car knowing where you are, where you're supposed to go from your account, and having that all interactive. And when someone cancels, diverting you to your next meeting. Think about that automation that we can envision, but really isn't practical yet. I think that those kind of applications will start to get deployed. And then I think the other area that I think is going to be exciting is where, and it's not going to be something we all see, but we will all benefit as more of the infrastructure that we rely on gets sensorized and gets instrumented. Bridges, tunnels, trains, our highways. We're going to see the benefits. We'll see, predictive maintenance. We'll have less crashes, less bridges falling, more jobs for people to fix bridges before they fall down, that kind of stuff. But also better traffic analysis, better flow analysis. We'll see dynamic changes in the grid. So there's been proof of concepts done in very smart cities where, a concert lets out and they reconfigure the stoplights, the taxis, the Ubers to meet the need at that moment, as opposed to waiting for the traffic to swell and think, oh, we need to do something. So that kind of smart city infrastructure starts to be enabled when I can not only connect, but I can provide the right applications and the right data all the way at the edge to make those decisions. So I think we'll start to see those benefits realized in the next 3 years as this capability comes online, and then we can do all those really cool things that we've been talking about.
Yeah. Well, it's all really great stuff, and those of us that have a little older remember the Intel Inside commercials where all of our computers say, and I'm looking at mine right now, Intel Inside, and so it's great to hear the advancement of Intel from your perspective beyond the way that we might all always think about it from our background and our prior history. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. So I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Dan. It was a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to reconnecting with you on the next one.
Thanks for listening to the 5G Guys. For more resources and to connect with Dan and Wayne, check out their website at 5gguys.com. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit that follow button and share this episode with your friends and family.